Well, hi, here's your ancient sage speaking to you about some very important subjects, including rhetoric, in a nutshell, induction and deduction, a little bit about logical fallacies. And all of this is what we are supposed to apply to our thinking and writing. Not just so much smoke that I blow, and I blow plenty of it, but rather something that you can use and should use whenever you sit down to write, whenever you confront a situation wherein you're called upon to arrive at a conclusion, present a case, make an argument for whatever it happens to be. It could be in a courtroom, could be outside. It could have to do with arguing that you really should have received a fairer price on that wonderful computer that you ordered from Amazon because it broke down after 3 days. So you make your case, you present your case, and that has to do with a logical sequence. It has to do with thought processes. And you know that famous definition of logic by that equally famous American writer, Ernest Hemingway, was that logic was a crap detector. Sorry to be a little off color there, but those are his words. In other words, it filters out when we are being led down the primrose path and being told something that is patently suspicious and untrue. But yet, it seems to be packaged in a logical package. Oh, they stole the election. Based on what? Based on what evidence? That is crap. Unadulterated. But it's being passed off as somehow logical and true. Why? Because a fool claimed it was true and kept saying over and over again that it was true, and that therefore it must be true. I don't know. That doesn't sound very logical to me. Maybe it does to someone else. But part of this is a defense. It's a defense against being used and abused by language and logic. Being manipulated by language and logic, such as we often are. And of course, there are usually fallacies involved in that. Outright lies, but also fallacies. So let's break this down a little bit. So there are two forms of arriving at conclusions. One is deduction. One is induction. And these forms of arriving at conclusions are very different in the way in which they operate. But yet, if we approach them as everyday processes that we go through and utilize virtually every day, it's not so mysterious. It's not so absolutely difficult to grab hold of and understand, because in fact we do. I'm going to take induction first. So keep in mind that what I'm going to tell you is very, very widely agreed upon, and you'll find it in textbooks and in various formats online and so on. So I'll give you some of those supplements, reliable materials that you can use to better understand these. But let's take it from a very up close and personal level, right? So I'm going to sit down and look at you for a minute. Turn the camera this way. So let's take something like induction. Induction does not claim certainty. It claims probability, not certainty. This light's too much. I'm going to get rid of that. Probability that it is possibly, even probably true, but it does not claim certainty. So, what's inductive? Inductive goes from specific to general. And ordinarily, lots of specifics to a generalized conclusion, which is, can you tell me? You're right, tentative. It is not established as 100% true. It is not going to claim it's 100% true. So even advertisements that you see oftentimes are based on inductive reasoning. So, if, for example, you go and you decide, I'm going to research an hypothesis. I have an idea of something that might be true, but I don't know. But I'm going to research it and find out. And at least have a conclusion that is a working conclusion that I can utilize. So, boy, some really down-to-earth types of activities tend to be inductive. Did you ever think about that? Many of you are at the stage where you're dating. I'm not. I'm a little past that. But you're dating. I remember that. And you are operating inductively. You have not made up your mind. So you're sampling the field. And you go out with this guy, let's say if you're a woman, and you go out to dinner, and he has this really obnoxious way of talking over the top of you. You try to hold a conversation. He wants to just talk about himself. Well, you know inductively that's not the man for you. So you go on another date. And this time, the conversation goes well. The guy has body odor, let's face it. Oh, it's bad news. Oh, get him out of here. Well, if you've gone through several of these trial and error situations and you finally arrive at a conclusion, that is, the one you want to stay with, the one you want to marry, or what have you, then you've operated inductively. I don't want to say it's tentative to the point where you're going to blow off the marriage, if that's what happens. But it is based on trial and error. It is based on sampling, right? Taste tests. You taste all of these colas and you decide you like Pepsi better than Coke. Well, that's inductive if you've tried a bunch of them. Or you've tried the same one several times and you've arrived at a conclusion. That is inductive. The Nielsen ratings that were used for television programs to decide how many people watch them, that's inductive. Polls and surveys. Yes, election polls, which are oftentimes wrong, but still based on an inductive process. That is, we have taken the best cross-representative sampling we can think of to arrive at a conclusion that this person or that person will win the election. Let's hope it's not Taylor Greene. Oh, what an abomination, an embarrassment to mankind and womankind. Anyway, I won't go there. That's not based, by the way, on a logical way of arriving at that conclusion. I hope you notice that. I simply ventured an opinion. There's a difference between reasoning to a conclusion and tossing out an opinion. Now, lately, we've got in the habit of simply tossing out opinions and supposing that they're logical conclusions. Oh, what a bunch of rot, as Hemingway would say. What a bunch of crap. All right, so that's induction. You can think of all kinds of processes. When you go shopping, that's inductive, if you have not arrived at your conclusion, right? If I go through and test and try on a bunch of shirts, you know, go through the racks and move them one by one. I've seen my wife do that. Just go through those racks and you look at all those lovely dresses one by one, and you go through that and you try some on and you say, hey, how does that look? How do you like that? Well, that's sampling. That's inductive. And so if you go through a lot of that trial and error, no matter what you're buying, maybe it's a car, you test drive it, that's inductive. Okay. But the conclusion you arrive at is tentative, not necessarily certain. Yet we use this every day of our lives, I hope to tell you, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's basically induction. What's deduction? Well, it works the opposite direction. General to specific. Claims certainty. So if you accept inductive, Ted, come on. Deductive premises. There's a major premise and a minor premise and a conclusion. That's called a deductive syllogism. Major premise, minor premise, conclusion leads to a deductive argument. So again, I want to put this in the realm of the everyday, not something abstract or theoretical, overly academic. Yes, they're academic subjects, but academic subjects can be everyday subjects too, right? So, if you've already arrived at a conclusion, sometimes based on inductive premises, then you act upon that conclusion. Let me give you an example. Pretty common one. When you're a little kid, you probably learned not to put your hand on a hot burner. How did you learn that? Well, maybe you didn't. If you did it more than once, shame on you. But if you tried that and you found out, whoa, that's pretty hot, I'm not going to do that. Then you come out with a deductive argument eventually. Because induction can be the other side of deduction in a sense. Inductively, observations astronomically verify that the solar system has as its center, not the Earth, but the sun. That was the geocentric universe. And remember, Galileo, Copernicus. Galileo was made to recant through the Inquisition that, I must have been wrong with my observations. But those observations showed that, unlike the biblical Joshua made the sun stand still, therefore the Earth is the center of the universe. The observations showed over a period of time, collected that data, that the sun is the center of the solar system, I should say. Right? Not the Earth. But that flew in the face of conclusions that were Bible-based, but not necessarily logical. So, deductive conclusions, you find to be will be binding, right? So, if you say, I must earn a C or better in English 101A in order to be allowed to take English 101B and enroll in it officially, that is essentially deductive. That is the major premise. Students who earn a C or better are allowed to go on to English 101B, where you are, what you're taking. I earned a C or better in English 101A. Therefore, what's the conclusion to the deductive argument? Conclusion is, I lost my whiteboard. Oh, well, who cares? No. The conclusion is I am legally allowed to take English 101B. If you've already decided what sort of career you want to pursue, and it's based on your experimentation, then you're operating in a deductive manner. You've decided you want to be an engineer. You've decided you want to be a computer programmer. You've decided you want to be a nurse. So I've decided that I am going to pursue a nursing degree. These courses are going to help fulfill the requirements for my nursing degree, including English 101B. Therefore, I will take English 101B to help fulfill my requirements for the nursing degree. That's operating deductively, right? Deductively. Major premise, minor premise, conclusion, right? All U.S. citizens must pay taxes or face consequences, except Donald Trump. But, I didn't say that. Did you hear it? I did not say that. I am a U.S. citizen. Therefore, I must pay federal income taxes or whatever, unless I expect to break the law. Speed limit here is 25 in the street out front. If I'm going 25 or under, I'm observing the speed limit. It's a law. So, induction is trial and error oriented. Deduction is law governance oriented. That is, that major premise is accepted to be true, right? And the most famous old one, which is really now a cliche, but I'll share it with you anyway. Who knows? Maybe it works for you. All people are mortal. Eventually have to die. I am a person. Therefore, eventually I have to die. But what you have to watch out for here, on both of these forms of reasoning, is applying critical thinking. Applying critical thinking. That is, questioning the sampling if it's inductive. Is it representative enough? Is it sufficient? Are there enough samples to arrive at a probable conclusion? Right? Takes a lot of samples, takes a lot of representative samples to arrive at that conclusion. So, we ask questions. Those are critical thinking questions. I don't think critical thinking is all as negative, for one thing. I don't think it's negative at all. It's creative thinking, oftentimes. It doesn't mean critical in the sense of being negative. But certainly, if you utilize these to your advantage, instead of having them, used against you, right? Years ago, I attended meetings that had to do with switching to a different type of calendar for school districts. And lots of deductive arguments were used to try to get people on board to accept year-round schools with varying schedules in one of the districts that my son and daughter at that time attended school in. Well, here was one of them. Do you want for your son, and this was sent out in a mailer, by the way, do you want your son or daughter to receive a better education? Oh, we say, yes, of course I do. Of course I do. Are you kidding? Year-round school has been proven to be more educationally sound. Therefore, you should support year-round school. But there's no necessary connection between the major premise, or question in this case, you want your student to receive a better education or an excellent education, top education. So, if you accept that as a premise, which is not, of course, it's a non sequitur. That is a premise that doesn't really lead to a conclusion. There's no necessary connection between the premise and the conclusion. Right? Then you are dealing with thinking critically about how these, can be used against you. When you have someone phrase the major premise as a question, right, and then turn it around and try to use it against you, you've got like the jaws of a trap being lowered upon you because you accepted a premise or two, and now all of a sudden, well, then you have to accept the conclusion. So what's critical thinking in this context is asking a lot of questions. Wait, is that major premise sound? Is the minor premise related? Does the conclusion follow from the premises? So you ask these questions, those are critical thinking questions. So from this, of course, we end up with lots and lots of those fun and interesting logical fallacies. I'm not going to go into great depth and detail on them. I think they're incredibly colorful, and anytime you see an election going on, you're going to see lots and lots of them. All sorts of fallacies. Oh! Well, Herschel Walker recently sort of got himself caught up in a major controversy, but who knows the truth of it all? Came out as supporting a ban on abortion, decided he could hold down that extreme wing of the Republican Party and run for office. Famous running back, right? So, there are all kinds of fallacies involved in all of this. Herschel Walker was a great running back, I think, for the Minnesota Vikings. Therefore, he would make an excellent congressman. What? I'm not so sure about that. Seems to be very, very questionable. It seems that the conclusion doesn't follow from the premises. And so try to be careful and be especially aware of these. Bandwagon is, of course, one of the major fallacies. Well, look, you know what? Marijuana is legal in California now, and it seems like everybody's using one form or another of it. So I think I'll jump on that bandwagon and try me some nice THC. That's the idea, well, other people are doing it, therefore it must be okay, or other people are thinking it. Oh, one of my all-time favorites was one of the most idiotic Fox News phrases I've ever heard. Some people are saying, or people are saying. We don't know what people, we don't know really what they're saying. We don't know that any of that is verifiable or true, or has been verified, but it's just throwing some red meat out there for people who are not using critical thinking in order to arrive at any sort of rational conclusion. In fact, far from it. Well, January 6th, right? That was a picnic. That was a patriotic event. Oh, you doubt that? You got to ask somebody like Mr. Ted Cruz, who tries to make a speech and support these rioters. Tries to make a play for it. Conscienceless, pointless, absolutely amoral. But there he is, trying to suppose that because it will get him votes, that this is some sort of patriotic event to defecate in the nation's capital, to pin police officers against gates, to destroy lives, to try to hang the vice president. Not that he didn't deserve it at one point or another, probably, but that this was all in the name of patriotism. So the whole business of painting an event such as that in a much different light than it actually was reeks of logical fallacies. All kinds of them. All kinds of them. Right and left. Right? So, we see them in lots of contexts. Don't have time to go into great depth of detail on them, but you'll receive information on common fallacies, and then I'm going to ask you to come up with your own fallacies in a very colorful way. I want you to demonstrate them as your own advertisement that you create. Now you can do this. This is for the discussion this week. Remember that you can do this with family members, you can do this with friends, you can do this with a spouse, you can do it with class members. And dress up and just have fun. Come on, let your hair down a little bit, right? Why not enjoy what we're doing? We can fight it, we can avoid it, we can treat it as if it's really some sort of painful experience. But we can enjoy it to the best of our abilities to do so. That's what I would recommend. You really have fun with that assignment and with others. So let's get on to a very skimpy thumbnail type of definition of rhetoric. Rhetoric can be seen as building the strongest case for an argument. It can be seen as a form of persuasion. That's a rich and complicated field of study. There are entire degrees in rhetoric. But the effective use of persuasion is one of the handiest and perhaps best short definitions of rhetoric, not to do service to the entire study. Sometimes we use that term to mean, oh, the senator is speaking rhetorically, meaning not necessarily speaking truthfully, but, for example, asking rhetorical questions, right? For example, are you for a long border wall between Mexico and the United States? If you are not, you believe the United States should be overrun with violent criminals and interlopers and people who come across the borders only to take advantage of U.S. citizens, right? Rapists. Okay. Well, talk again about pushing emotional hot buttons. But if you don't agree with that, you're being unpatriotic and you are opening yourself and your neighborhood to potential danger, right? So try to be aware of these importance. So rhetoric has a great deal to do with building logical arguments, and in our case, into your essays. So it's the idea that your audience is not opposed to you. Your audience is not on your side. Your audience, if you want to visualize it, might be oftentimes one of your classmates or many of your classmates. So they might be reasonably informed, but you've done more research into the topic, whatever it happens to be. Inflation, boy, are we experiencing that lately. $7+ for a gallon of gas. I went to buy some butter the other day. For a small container, it was $7. Boy, that's a little sticker shock going on there. So if you're going to make a case about inflation and what causes it and what policies lead towards it and away from it, you don't just say, well, the president caused inflation. Or even the former president caused inflation. Without evidence, without facts, without sound reasoning, we can't make that claim. So it's all about making a claim and backing a claim. And backing it by looking at opposition claims, refuting them, but doing so in a respectful and reasonable manner because you are trying for something. What are you trying for? I want to, well, I want to run by you three concepts which feed into this notion of rhetoric. Ethos, E-T-H-O-S, didn't write it down, but that's all right, you'll get over it. Well, maybe I will. Ethos, pathos, and logos. Obviously, words that come from Greek, but ethos refers to, in this context, your own credibility. How do you obtain credibility with an audience? Well, you show that you're informed. You try to show that you can be reasonable about the arguments that you're waging, that they aren't frivolous, that you're not trying to just push emotional buttons of one kind or another. We have a lot of high-stakes brinkmanship going on right now regarding Putin and his threats about nuclear weapons. All of that involves a great deal of delicate negotiations, but certainly also quite a bit of fear and concern surrounding someone like Putin's sanity. After, of course, he invaded the Ukraine, slaughtered all kinds of innocent people in order to extend what he thinks is his empire. It's not going well for him, but there's nothing I like more than to see something not go well for a tyrant like Putin. But in any case, so we're dealing with logical suppositions. And we are trying to get to the bottom of what is the assumption behind the premise. So that's a huge part of critical thinking. What is someone assuming? So if you want to build ethos, you have to come across as someone that can be trusted. And in your writing, if you simply make claims at random without supporting them, you don't gain a lot of ethos. You don't gain any. You don't gain any, right? I put a light that you see in the hallway there that comes on and comes off by itself. It's a motion detector. Now, since I am not in the vicinity of it in order to turn it on or turn it off, I find it very interesting that it turns on and off by itself. So I might conclude that there are ghosts in the house, that they are, turning it off and turning it on. Since I'm not in the vicinity of it, and no one else that I can see is, I could arrive at that conclusion. Now that may or may not engender confidence in me on your part. It may or may not. But if I'm going to obtain ethos, which is the root of our word, ethics, to do right or wrong, the study of what is moral, what is right versus what isn't, then I'm going to have to show that I know the subject. I'm going to have to demonstrate that. I'm going to have to demonstrate that I'm going to try to respect the opposition arguments, that I'm going to field them respectfully and reasonably, but assertively, that I'm going to weigh those arguments carefully. I'm going to decide based on almost like a scales, using the scales of justice, which side is the preponderance of evidence and reasoning, heavier or stronger, the weighing. It's a great way to go about thinking and writing. Ultimately, perhaps critical thinking is questioning yourself, questioning your own assumptions, questioning your own premises. That's the hardest, most difficult form of critical thinking, I think. There is. Logos. Well, we don't need to go far to figure what that is, right? That is a logical appeal. Logos means that you're using logic to make your case. Not emotionalism, not sentimental arguments solely, but reasoning. You cannot simply claim, somebody's a horrible person, and have that be believed without evidence to that effect. Right? You cannot claim, all elections are being stolen, without having evidence for that inane claim. Unless you want to be regarded as a pompous, arrogant fool. Well, let's not name names. So, the third of these considerations is pathos. Well, that is the emotional argument. It's not that those are out of bounds. It's just that they're used together with reasonable appeals, rational arguments. And if you expect to win your case solely through an emotional argument, then you may be on very, very shaky ground, right? If you're wanting the country to go to war, and you can demonstrate an atrocity on the part of another nation, like remember the Maine, right? Or the U-boat incidents prior to World War I. You are using an emotional argument. That is, it's not that it's totally invalid. You're using an emotional argument. Many advertisements do this. They want to sell cars or perfume, you name it, by depicting love and or sex or both. In order to make it desirable for you to buy that particular product. So, there it is. That's a great deal. But I hope you find it useful enough that you can take and employ these ideas and techniques. And instead of, well, I can pass a test on that, I can identify this or that, or I can pick a multiple choice question, right? You are actually deploying these skills in your thinking and writing, thereby raising the level of it, right? Just we talk about raising the level of language to college level, for example. You're raising the level of thinking to college level and beyond. No question about it. Okay, well that's all I have to say about that. And I hope you have a wonderful day. I will talk to you soon. Huh? Test, test, test.